If you like your fantasy with murder mysteries, some forensic alchemy, a touch of Jewish mythology, golems, and biting satire about religion, nobility, and what makes someone human, if so, then today's book just might be for you. Today, I'll be reviewing Feet of Clay by Terry Pratchett. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan, and today we're taking a look at the 19th book in the Discworld series and the 4th installment in the City Watch sub-series. As usual, for those of you that don't know, I am covering every book in the Discworld series, and since there are more than 40 books, it is worth reminding everyone what happens in each book. So, I am including this somewhat detailed and definitely with spoilers summary. So here it is. In Feet of Clay, Commander Sam Vimes and the Ankh-Morpork City Watch face two major problems. First, someone is murdering people in strange and grisly ways, and Lord Vetinari, the city's steely patrician and the leader of the city, is slowly being poisoned by mysterious means. As if that weren't enough, someone has been secretly building new golems, which are magical clay beings forced to obey sacred instructions etched inside their heads, and one of those golems may have killed a priest and a baker. As the Watch begins to investigate, a second conspiracy surfaces, a cabal of nobles and guild leaders who are sick of Vetinari's technocratic rule. They want to install a puppet king on the throne. Literally, they plan on actually putting someone on the throne that they can control. In so doing, they've helped engineer a golem king named Meshuggah and given him contradictory, idealistic instructions like bring peace to the world and treat everyone fairly. And of course, the result of that is a magical time bomb who ends up going berserk. Meanwhile, one of the original 12 golems, named Dorfel, is arrested after falsely confessing to the crimes. And as the case unfolds, Dorfel becomes the real heart of the story, as he represents the golem's desire for freedom and dignity and some sense of personhood. When Commander Vimes destroys the words in Dorfel's head, it frees him from slavery, allowing him to think and speak and to choose for himself. And so when Dorfel's declaration of words in my heart cannot be taken can land with just real emotional weight. And his arc becomes one of the most moving in the entire Discworld series. Dorfel is later rebaked with a voice, and he joins the Watch as the first truly free golem, which is a key part of the City Watch, this discussion of personhood and all of the different characters that are on it, and just the different prejudices, assumptions that they bring to the job. And of course, that is a key part of the commentary that Terry Pratchett is using. While all of this is happening, Cherry Littlebottom, who is a new dwarf recruit and the Watch's first forensic alchemist, starts wearing makeup and expressing some femininity, which is shocking in dwarf society. That, of course, is something that the book has made clear. Dwarfs, especially the women dwarfs, are not keen on normal human standards of beauty. They have impressive beards, something that they are quick to say. They, in many ways, are going to be just as gruff and grumpy as any of the male dwarfs, and so that is going to be one of the things that just really is a not just gender bending norm, but also a societal and a species bending norm. And that is going to parallel Dorfel asking this question of personhood and what does it mean to live with integrity in a society that won't accept your identity. Eventually, the Watch uncovers the full conspiracy. They discover where the poisoned candles are coming from that are, of course, what is poisoning the Lord Vetinari. They discover the false heir in Nobby Nobbs and the manipulation by Dragon King of Arms, a vampire herald who sought to remake the city's power structure. And Dorfel arrests Dragon. Vimes, in a fit of righteous outrage, which is a bit different for Vimes, he actually burns the Royal College of Heralds to the ground after learning that two innocent people from his old slum neighborhood died from poisoned candles meant for the elite. This is a really interesting scene because one of the things you're tracking with Vimes is as he is growing his station in life, and it's not always something that he really wants. It's not something that he seeks out. And so it is one of the more humorous elements is this friction between Vimes as he is becoming more successful, and especially in a book like this where there's a really strong actual mystery element to it that would reflect some dime novel mysteries. And you are seeing him as he is becoming a little more acquainted, a little more adjusted with the finer things in life, not necessarily in an overly indulgent way, but you also see him being relatively austere character in most respects, and so this moment of outrage where he actually burns down the Royal College of Heralds is very surprising for Vimes, but it does remind us of his roots. And again, one of the main origins of the whole City Watch is Vimes coming from humble roots, and yet how high he has climbed. And I think that makes this all the more interesting of a moment in the book. Vetinari, of course, had suspected the entire plot from the beginning, and he let it play out so the watch could scare the conspirators into submission. And as always, the patrician wins, but it's really Vimes that comes away with a moral victory of his own and a new dartboard for his office, but I will let you read to find exactly what that is referencing. As usual, Pratchett's one-liners and philosophical musings are worth the price of admission. Some of my favorite lines from this one include stuff like, just because someone's a member of an ethnic minority doesn't mean they're not a nasty, small-minded little jerk. A reminder that someone can be a small-minded little jerk regardless of their background. Another good line, and while it was regarded as pretty good evidence of criminality to be living in a slum, for some reason owning a whole street of them merely got you invited to the very best social occasions. That is, of course, referencing slumlords and just our social respect, or at the very least regard, for landowners and this real class division, something that is a common commentary in all of Discworld, but especially among the City Watch, and I think that's a great quote that helps to embody that. Another good quote, whoever had created humanity had left in a major design flaw. It was its tendency to bend at the knees. This is one of those great Pratchett quotes where it seems like it's just kind of a funny like throwaway line, but if you think about it, I actually really think that's being quite profound when you think about our ability as humans to survive, be it through cognitive dissonance or our willingness, even if we reject someone or an idea initially, eventually we can be worn down because there are other things that we value more than necessarily being right or being morally correct. There could certainly be times when we decide to just go with the flow. We could bend the knee and acknowledge a new type of leadership. There's a lot of little reasons we may choose to bend the knee because that is just something that is going to be easier for us in the end. Another good line. There were no public health laws in Ankh-Morpork. It would be like installing smoke detectors in hell. Again, referencing Ankh-Morpork, which if you have not read any of the books, Ankh-Morpork is the main city, and it is this lovable, disgusting, terrible city, which I think is predominantly based off of a medieval London, a city really challenged with hygiene and sanitation, but it's also just got all these different lovable characters, and it really seems to make itself run off of, well, in some cases, a lot of grit. In some cases, it just seems to keep running. And of course, that is going to be one of the things that makes it such an appealing city. Here's another good line. Royalty was like dandelions. No matter how many heads you chopped off, the roots were still there underground, waiting to spring up again. I love that line. I think it's very true. If anyone knows me, they know that I do not care for royalty of any kind. I've never understood the American obsession with the British royalty. I really don't understand why anyone is obsessed with any kind of royalty. But I do think that there's this tendency, especially historically, that you just can't get rid of royalty. Even when there's a popular uprising, even if a king or queen is deposed, there is always somebody to step into the power vacuum. I think that's why that quote resonated with me. If you were going to be successful in the world of crime, you needed a reputation for honesty. Again, seems like a silly little throwaway line, but that's one of those ones where I think if you just stop and think for a moment, there is an odd profundity to that, and it matches well with much of the commentary that you're going to find in the Discworld world. So, speaking of feet of clay, who is it for? And if you, like me, have been making your way through the Discworld books, especially the City Watch arc, this one is essential. It's book 19 overall, and it's book 4 in the Watch subseries. So while you can jump in here, it's much richer if you've tracked the rise of the characters like Vimes and Carrot and Angua and Detritus and just the rest of the gang. That said, like any Discworld book, if you love the philosophical humor or the social satire or just the razor-sharp writing, you'll still enjoy it. Pratchett gives you plenty to chew on, deep meditations on freedom and belief and justice and identity, all laced with his typical wit and at times slapstick humor. And there's always something profound just beneath all of those punchlines. I will say this one is a little different in tone, though. Pratchett often critiques religion, but Feet of Clay leans heavily specifically on Jewish mythology, especially Eastern European golem folklore. For some readers, that might add depth and interest. For others, the connection to a marginalized religious tradition might feel a little too loaded, depending on your background and sensitivities. But it's worth noting the book walks, I think, a tightrope between reverence and metaphor, and as always, his satire. Who is this book not for? As always, if you've never read a Discworld book before, this probably isn't the place to start. It's pretty deep into the lore and the cast of characters. You'll miss a lot of the emotional payoff and context for who those characters are and why what they're doing matters, and the long arc that we've seen coming from each of these characters. Also, if you don't enjoy fantasy with this heavy dose of satire and parody, this may not be your cup of tea. The story is driven by action, and it does have most of your traditional fantasy tropes. However, it doesn't take itself too seriously, and that can be something that annoys some people, or it's pretty clear what a lot of the commentary is discussing when it comes to class relationships and class structure, and it is not speaking kindly of it. So you may take issue with any of that. You might be frustrated with how Feet of Clay prioritizes ideology and maybe some wordplay over just giving you a straightforward narrative. But it is still a very interesting read, and as always, I loved it. Feet of Clay is, in many respects, one of Pratchett's best novels, in my opinion, at least one of the lesser known ones that I think is quite good. I think all of City Watch is very interesting. This one is a little deeper into it, so when I usually ask for suggestions, this one's not going to be one of the first ones people mention, just because they would recommend that you go back to the earlier books in the sub-series, and I understand that, but I think this is a very good book, and I certainly enjoyed reading it, and I think that in many ways that its approach to a murder mystery, a depiction of social satire, and some philosophical reflections on power and prejudice and questions of what it means to be human and personhood. And I think all of that makes it a very funny, as well as a smart, and also an enraging and a very compassionate book all at once. And I think that Pratchett often does that very well. And he really emphasizes that justice is messy, and that our beliefs are powerful, and sometimes that the most human characters really aren't human at all. But I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this book. Please let me know what you think about this book in the Discworld series, the City Watch subseries, or anything else related to Ankh-Morpork. Please let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video or any of my content, please share it. And don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications. And until next time, keep those pages turning.